All right. Give me one moment. Let me get everything set up and straight in this piece. I got it running in the background so you all could keep up with what I'm talking about. I may be going a little bit faster than my conversation, but it is what is in the background, so it's all good, right? So when I was when I was watching yesterday, it was is Christianity the white man's religion? And this question continuously comes up. It's like what the black church has done for the black community. The black church is the best option for the black community as far as liberation theology is concerned and has organizing the community for the betterment and the well-being of its members are concerned, right? And then these Christian pastors are touting that this ideology as if though it is the best ideology out here, not really taking into consideration the very fact that has people that were brought to the United States, not just the Americas, but the United States of America, stripped of our culture and then turned into true chattel slaves, we lost everything and we were surrounded by the most monstrous culture we had ever known, right? And so we were stripped of our culture, our religion, our spirituality, and honestly our connection to our ancestors, which is where our true power lies, right? And so then what you have is a situation where you in in people in general, you're always going to have what's called natural leadership. That's always going to be there, right? There's no denying that, that's always going to be something that arises within every community. And so then the people are going to gravitate, they're going to use whatever they have to inform their leadership. And as far as all of our movements being informed by Christian liberation theology, that's simply because that's the only theology that was available to our people. Now, what I'm about to express to you, this is why Pan-Africanism and the Hotep community are hand in hand, go hand in hand, right? Because what I'm going to express to you is the fact that um, when our people were brought over from Africa and they landed in other areas, when when those brothers and sisters rebelled, they formed what's called quilombos or maroon colonies, right? And they weren't just random spots in the woods, right? These were neighborhoods and communities comprised of Africans that had had enough of the oppression and the abuse of the enslavement system, right? And so these Africans, they weren't having it. And so they bounced. They bounced and they left the plantation life behind, right? And they went into a space that was not just a hideout, right? But they built and formed their own independent sovereign nations. They ran their own nation. It was all about self-governance. And they were able to be self-governing communities because they were able to retain their culture. You see, that's the difference. And this is what the reclamation of African culture will do to you. It will give you liberation theological mindsets. When we have these Christian liberation theologies, it more takes on the form of let me integrate with you so we can go hand in hand and I can walk with you to Rome. That's kind of what it looks like, right? When we talk about these liberation theologies of these Christians versus these liberation theologies and these liberation practices of Africans, right? So these these Africans and these indigenous people, they were running away from the oppressor, right? And then it was straight up rebellion that they were about, right? It would put everything on the line to be free, right? And then they escaped and then they took back their life. You understand what I'm saying? And so, and then these quilombos, these maroon colonies, they weren't just like thrown together. They were very organized. They ran their own thing. They were like self-governed and they made their own rules. They had their own leaders. They handled their own business. And nobody from the outside, no government facility. Yo, 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 what's up? What's up? What's up? There was no government facility. There was no welfare in the system. You understand? They took care of their own through their own African indigenous philosophy that they carried with them from the motherland that was not taken away from them. You see, that's the difference between African liberation theology, true African liberation theology, and Christian integration politics. With African liberation theology, you use your liberation theology, you use your religion, your spiritual culture in order to liberate yourself and give yourself a sovereign national life, right? Christian integration politics just lets the European know that you just want to be good. You just want them to be better, to you. You would like for them, you would still like to be enslaved inside their system. You just want to be treated better. That's kind of what it is. And so it's really weird. These Christian pastors are always throwing this Christian liberation theology in our face, but not taking into consideration the indoctrination, the cleansing, right? The cleansing of our cultural, African cultural self, and the imprinting of this European Christianized African, right? And then telling us we use their system for our liberation. And it's not really liberation, it's integration, which is fine. It's better than oppression. You understand what I mean? But let's really look at it, right? In order to really answer that question, we have to take ourselves outside of the North American concept and then see the greater African diaspora. Okay. Now, the Colombo communities, the Maroon communities, it wasn't just about hiding out, right? They were about, they were about sustainable communities. It was about growing their own food, right? And then it was farming, everything that we're talking about nowadays. Let's grow our own food. Let's be organic. They were straight up organic and they were growing their own food, right? Because that's what you did back home. The difference between slavery in the United States and slavery in the other American colonies, the other American territories, was that in the other American territories, they were not interested in the cultivation of our mind, so to speak. They were interested in the physical labor of our bodies. And so we retained our African mind in these other areas, more of our African mind in these other areas than we did in the United States. So we were thoroughly brainwashed in the United States, not completely, but thoroughly. You understand? We retained Africanisms here in the United States, but not as many as in Haiti. Not as many Africanisms has in Cuba, so to speak, right? We were able to retain more, and so our liberation movements were more powerful in those areas. And so that's what you have going on there. You understand what I'm saying? And so the way that the communities was organized was around chiefdoms. You understand? Just to say, we brought the African political system from Africa to the Quilombos, from Africa to the Maroon colonies, right? We kept our belief, we kept our connection to our ancestors alive. You understand? We continue to pay respect and honor and homage to our ancestors, which is one of the reasons why there are still Quilombos and still Maroon communities to this day. Now, some of these communities have definitely been infiltrated, and then didn't understand or, you know, lost the vision of the original founders has 50, 60, 70, 100 years moved on and the community changed, not knowing and understanding the concept of consistent, persistent generational warfare, which is what we're under. We have to understand the shifting dynamics of this capitalistic cultural war that we're under. If we don't understand these shifting dynamics that occur, the times of heightened liberation struggle, and then low, the times of, slow planning, so to speak, when we can sit back and enjoy some of the benefits of the struggles of our elders, but still being consistently ready to come forward when the time is needed. This whole Make America Great Again movement, this whole thing that everybody's kind of responding to, we're not understanding that those same people that lost rights in the 60s when we gained more rights did not lose their thought process. They were still moving forward, still thinking and strategizing on how they can get back in power and how they could reset America to the way it's been. And so we forgot about that. We became docile. We have to understand that what the America that our ancestors grew up in is still simmering there underneath, you know, the just right underneath the surface. And if we go to sleep, we'll find ourselves in a weird situation as time moves on. We have to continuously to understand this constant warfare that we're in and strategize and understand the different tactics that we have to use depending upon the social political situation we find ourselves in that moment. Right. And that's anyway, that's the status of some of these communities, but the Colombos and the Maroon communities in these other nations, they didn't just popped up. They didn't just pop up, right? It was related to the entire slave trade situation, the transatlantic slave trade. And these people that are talking about this stuff didn't exist. It makes no sense. It's a connecting system, and then the differing dynamics that happen in the different communities where African found themselves in explains the connections. You understand what I'm saying? So, and you see, the transatlantic slave trade was a massive operation, snatching brothers and sisters from the continent and shipping them all across the ocean, just like cargo, right? And then literally to work them to death, right? That's what the system was inside Cuba, inside Haiti, inside South American colonies, right? It was not about, but see, in America, because America jumped off and got really strong into it towards the later end, they had to cultivate a slave system, and it was more about the control and it was the control of the thought that were inside the mind, and then having a steady supply of brothers and sisters versus the system was in these other countries when this when the capture of Africans was at its height, where they didn't care about, sustaining an African's life. They would just, work this African brother or sister who's in their teens and early 20s, you know, 3 to 5 years was the average lifespan of a brother or sister taken from the continent, brought to the Americas. After that brother or sister would be worked where his or her life was no longer there, they would just replace them. It was easier to replace them than to keep them alive. And that's just how the system worked. That's the system, and that was where the way it was in those areas. And so there were several things that happen as a result of that behavior towards us, right? Number one, because they were not interested in in re-education of our mind, so to speak. When we came from Africa, we retained more of our African nature. And so when we ran away to form these communities, the system that we set up and the structure that we set up in these maroon colonies, in these quilombos, reflected the African value system, the African liberation theology that we came over here with. And so then that's the big difference that you have between the civil rights marching because we got, shot on the street versus causing war and fighting for sovereign land and nationhood. Right? That's what you get when you return, when you go back to your African roots. That's what you get when you go back to your melanated roots. You get a spirit of sovereignty. You get the idea, the feeling that you have to have land to take care of your groups of people, that you have to be free to create the future and to create the society that will allow you the full expression of your life, the full expression of your culture, the full expression of your spirituality, right? So let's move on here, right? Now, hmm, let me see something here. So the structure of the Quilombo was like this, right? There was chiefdoms, there was kings that came over, that system came over from Africa. They had a council of elders, they had military leaders, and then they had a social hierarchy. I mean, it was an entire system that they brought over with them. And when now I have never been to a Quilombo, which is kind of actually sad. I should be going to visit because they still exist. Um, but but this is the structure that they have. Now I do have people I know that have been there. And the interesting thing is they are divorced from the mainstream society. And so what I've heard being reported back is they want some of the advancement of society, because there's one thing that this Western society has is advanced technology. And then when they went off into these maroon colonies, they cut themselves off for their freedom, for their sanity, for their mind. They cut themselves off from the rest of the advancement of society, so to speak, of the technological advancements. And I keep hearing that that's what the younger generation wants. They want access to the so-called comforts of the West. And so that seems to be like a theme that constantly runs through a lot of these different communities that I've visited, right? But whenever the Christian pastors bring that up as a point in talking about the resiliency of and the militancy of Christian activism in America. Just the response is there was no other liberation theology that the person had to inform their consciousness, right? When we were in the plantations, we were not allowed the drum, as it was said on the panel that I watched the other night. It was taken and stripped from us, and we were given the Bible. So we used the Bible in order to inform our liberation struggles. And it only took us so far, because ultimately the Bible will tell us to merge with them and then somehow tell us to support Rome, so on and so forth. So that's just a brief kind of, response, Afro-apologetic response, Afrogetics response to that particular question. So when you come across a Christian that says, well, Christianity has been a liberating theology that Marcus Garvey used, that Martin Luther King used, that Denmark Vesey used, not Denmark Vesey, but that Nat Turner used, so on and so forth. The response is there was no other theology that they had available to them. There was remnants of Africanisms that was brought over from Africa, so to speak. Like, I understand that Turner was a priest or had been initiated in the remnants that was brought over from Africa. But the use of the Bible and the use of the Bible in order to attain liberation is what was available to them. But if they had retained their Africanisms, if they had retained their African culture, they would have been able to run off and then create communities, sovereign nation states, in order to live, thrive, and survive inside the wilderness and hells of North America. All right. Thank you all for joining me. Light and love, peace and blessings. And like and subscribe to the channel if you like the content. And I'm going to keep growing and building. All right. Peace.